Hey guys, welcome back. I'm going to be walking you through my process on this piece that I recently finished for my fantasy series. My process in this video was pretty straightforward. I started with a super rough sketch just to get the idea down, and then I immediately moved to 3D to start blocking in the scene. The workflow in 3D on this piece was actually pretty straightforward as well. As far as assets for the 3D scene, it was really just a combination of the character that I created for the fantasy series and Megascan's assets that I've collected. So here I'm just kind of warping the tree trunk, the rocks, just trying to get a feel for how they're going to kind of fit together here in a small area by the tree. I also use assets from Terrain Domain, which are really great for just adding in large amounts of terrain that you need a little bit of detail on. So those are just kind of for the background there as I kind of move them around. And, some of the assets weren't necessarily in the right spot for me, so I wanted to warp them and adjust them and get them to a much more interesting shape and form based on the sketch that I did. And sometimes the character needs work in his pose. I wanted to make sure that the character's pose was interacting with the environment, not just standing there. So I thought that would add a little bit more emotion and movement. So here the scene's pretty much already ready to go. I decided that I would work on the background structure in Photoshop and not 3D. I didn't really want to tie myself down working on another asset, even if it were block out form, because it's going to be so far away. I chose not to even bother. Final pieces of the puzzle for me were adding in extra branches to the scene, to the tree, just to give it a little bit more detail. And then the last thing I wanted to do was scatter some grass on the rocks in the foreground to give it a little bit more life there as well. Once the render's in Photoshop, first thing that I do is I organize all of the render passes, make sure that they're good to go all in one file. And then that way I can start using the selections from those render passes to isolate the different layers of the render for me to work on. In the beginning stages of Paintover, I always try to start with the sky just to help establish the mood that I'm going for in the piece. What I like to do is bring in a few different skies just to try out and see which one I like the most. So here I'm also bringing in some photo texture assets for the tree just to add more detail. I knew that I wasn't going to be painting every single branch from scratch, and I think this would just allow me to kind of speed up that part of the workflow. Sometimes the piece isn't necessarily going to fit within the right dimensions, so if I have to extend the canvas, I might have to paint out more of the image depending on the assets that are cut off as well. I knew the scene was going to be pretty foggy as far as the atmosphere, so I wanted to make sure that I was kind of mimicking that in the background, mid-ground asset behind the character, just to kind of get that asset ready and that layer. Occasionally throughout a piece, you're going to see me flipping the image. That's just a way for me to check if anything is off or doesn't look right. So here I'm starting to bring in some foreground photo textures and just painting them in to the environment, just trying to get the lighting and values dialed properly. I knew I didn't want the character to just be completely surrounded by rock. I wanted to have a little bit more contrast in the combination of the grass mixed with the rock there. At this point in the piece, I'm still kind of focused more so on what's already there and just kind of amplifying that. I knew that I was going to be adding the structure in the background, but it wasn't the focus just yet. And then here you can see me blocking in the structure, trying to get a feel for what kind of shapes I was going for. The sketch, I kind of knew that I was going to have a structure there, but I wasn't necessarily sure what that structure was going to look like. So this is just a little bit of play on just blocking it in and just getting it visible so I can get a better sense of how it reads. If you guys are interested in the full process video and the brushes that I used, I've actually linked that below in my Patreon. If you guys wanted to sign up there, I'm going to be releasing a lot more of these videos and assets that I use in my work. Now that the majority of the elements are kind of in place in the piece, I usually like to start exploring some color grading, just to kind of get a better feel for how I'm going to kind of stitch the image together mood-wise. And the lookup tables are a really great way to do that quickly. So here I wasn't too happy with how the smoke is interacting with the structure in the back, so I'm just playing a little bit with what's possible there, seeing what I can get away with, and making it blend better with the background. The idea with the structure really was just to kind of hint at something being there, not necessarily pulling too much focus there. So here I was just playing with darkening the background, just wanted to reduce the contrast a little bit. Now I'm starting to add a little bit more shapes to the background structure. I thought it'd be kind of cool if it was some kind of like pointy castle or something like that. Also, for the sake of composition, I generally like to think about pointy roofs as arrows. So in this case, those roofs are kind of pointing to the top of the canvas, and then that's going to lead your eye toward the tree, which brings you back to the character. One thing that was bothering me was the area on the top right of the image. I didn't really want it to be too empty there, so I was trying to figure out a way to fill in that space with some grass or some foliage. When I'm doing color grading for a piece, usually going to take some time and just messing with different lookup tables and filters and potentially even gradient maps just to see what's possible and see what fits the mood that I'm going for. So here I'm painting in a cloak or a cape for the character. I wanted to add a little bit more motion on that side, just to kind of aid in the flow of the image. So just add some more motion to him as well and pull your eye there a bit. So now I'm just bringing in a few different photo textures of grass and weeds and stuff, just to add a little bit more detail to those parts of the image. This is another trick I like to use. This is called AKVIS oil paint. The great thing about this is that you can run your image through it and it'll give you this painterly oil effect that I really like to use in my images, and just makes it look less like a 3D render with photos on it. When I'm working on a piece, I generally like to bounce between areas of the image. I find that that's more interesting and keeps me kind of going. I kind of get sick of certain areas of an image if maybe something's not working, or it just allows me to switch it up a little bit and keep the progress moving through the image. I noticed certain parts of the grass in the 3D render that I didn't like being there, and they were just kind of floating, so I decided to get rid of those. I felt the foreground had too much contrast, and I wanted it to blend some more with the rest of the image. I also thought it would be kind of cool to paint some more roots on the right side of the piece to help lead your eye in a bit more. At this point in the piece, I'm pretty much done with everything I set out to do. It's just a matter of pulling the rest of the image together, working on some color grading, and then adding some grain texture, maybe some chromatic aberration. But yeah, the image is pretty much done here, so I'm just wrapping it up. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this process video. If you guys enjoy the more chill narrated style, definitely let me know. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.